370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9.
We have breaking news. Malaysia Airlines confirms it has lost contact with a plane carrying 227 passengers.
It seems to have vanished into thin air.
What do we tell the family members? What do we tell the media?
For over a decade, the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 has haunted the world, spawning conspiracy theories, billion-dollar searches, and unimaginable heartbreak for hundreds of families.
The disappearance of Flight MH370 is one of the biggest mysteries in modern aviation history.
But now, a new chapter is unfolding. Scientists have made a discovery so shocking, so bizarre, it has the aviation world on edge.
Malaysia 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. Good night, Malaysia 370.
This isn't a theory. This isn't a rumor. This is real. And what scientists just found inside Malaysian Flight 370 shocked the whole world. The night MH370 disappeared. It was supposed to be just another red-eye flight, routine, uneventful. On March 8, 2014, Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370, a Boeing 777-200ER, took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:41 a.m. local time, bound for Beijing Capital International Airport. On board were 239 people, business travelers, tourists, families, students, infants, and a highly experienced flight crew. There was nothing out of the ordinary in those first moments. The plane reached cruising altitude, and air traffic control handed over responsibility to Vietnam. But then, radio silence. MH370 never checked in. At 1:21 a.m., the aircraft's transponder suddenly stopped transmitting, and it vanished from civilian radar without a trace. But military radar still had eyes on it for a little while. And what they saw was baffling. Instead of continuing toward China, MH370 made a sharp turn westward. It flew back over the Malay Peninsula, skirted the edges of Thai and Malaysian airspace, then turned south over the Andaman Sea and into the vastness of the southern Indian Ocean. And then it was gone. No mayday, no emergency call, no signs of mechanical failure, just silence. Within hours, frantic families gathered in Beijing and Kuala Lumpur, staring at arrival boards frozen in time, watching their loved ones' names remain unclaimed. Panic set in. Confusion followed. But no one could have imagined just how deep this mystery would go, or how long it would last. The world responded with urgency, but also with disbelief. Within days, an unprecedented multinational search operation was underway. More than 24 nations joined forces: Australia, China, the US, the UK, France, India, Japan, and others, offering naval ships, aircraft, satellites, and deep-sea submersibles. The initial search radius spanned thousands of kilometers, from the South China Sea to the Strait of Malacca. But when MH370's satellite handshake data, Inmarsat pings, indicated the plane had likely flown south over the Indian Ocean, attention shifted. And so began what would become one of the largest and most expensive search operations in aviation history, costing more than $160 million and scouring over 120,000 square kilometers of remote ocean. But the sea gave nothing back. No floating debris, no oil slicks, no fuselage, no signs of impact. Search teams mapped the ocean floor in high definition, terrain previously unseen by human eyes. Yet it was as if the plane had slipped into a different dimension. "This is impossible," murmured air traffic controllers. "This can't happen," echoed aviation experts. "It's 2014. We track packages better than planes." For the families waiting in Beijing, Kuala Lumpur, and across the globe, the absence of answers was its own kind of torment. Each day brought a mix of grief, false leads, conspiracy theories, and government statements that said so little, yet meant so much. And then came the questions. How could a 250-ton aircraft simply vanish? As the search dragged on and confidence waned, speculation took center stage. With no cockpit voice recorder, no flight data recorder, and no wreckage, all that remained was theory. Some pointed the finger at the pilot, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a man with over 18,000 hours of flying experience, praised by colleagues, but later scrutinized by investigators. A home flight simulator found in his residence had route data eerily similar to MH370's final known trajectory. Was this a premeditated act? Was it a suicide mission? Others posited a massive mechanical failure, followed by a slow decompression that rendered all on board unconscious, a ghost flight, drifting on autopilot until it ran out of fuel and plunged into the sea. But not all explanations stayed within the realm of science. Some imagined a hijacking, cloaked in silence. Others suspected a cyber attack, where someone took control remotely. And then came the whispers. A black ops mission gone wrong, military involvement, even alien abduction. Yet no matter the theory, all roads lead to frustration, and the handling of the crisis by Malaysian authorities didn't help. Officials were slow to release crucial radar data. Information came in fragments and often contradicted earlier statements. Some nations accused Malaysia of withholding information. There were delays in organizing the search, hesitation in acknowledging the plane's change in course, and a reluctance to pursue pilot culpability. This lack of transparency shattered public trust. For the families, every news briefing was a new wound. For aviation analysts, it was a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces. For the public, MH370 became a case study in modern mystery, one with no villain, no closure, and no ending. And yet, that was only the beginning. The deep sea mysteries. When the world's attention began to wane and official efforts were suspended, it was a private American marine exploration company, Ocean Infinity, that refused to let the trail go cold. In 2018, they embarked on a mission that many deemed futile, chasing shadows in the darkest corners of the planet, the depths of the southern Indian Ocean. But unlike previous efforts, they came equipped with an arsenal of cutting-edge technology. Deploying autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, robotic explorers untethered from surface ships, they began scanning the ocean floor with ultra-high-resolution synthetic aperture sonar. These machines moved like ghostly sentinels, hundreds of meters below the surface, silently mapping the terrain of a world so alien and hostile it may as well have been another planet. The data began to pour in. Ghost ships, long lost and forgotten from centuries past, emerged from the sediment like skeletal remains. Towering geological ridges and deep abyssal trenches, some previously uncharted, were revealed, evidence of the Earth's raw, violent tectonic activity. It was as if they were uncovering the history of time itself, layer by silent layer. But not a single piece of flight MH370. No wings, no fuselage, no black box ping. Nothing that could definitively say, this is where it ended. Each day spent at sea felt like plunging deeper into the unknown, not just geographically but metaphysically. It was as if the ocean, in all its ancient, indifferent majesty, had swallowed the aircraft whole and sealed its secrets with pressure and darkness. Then came a moment that reignited both hope and dread. The sonar systems began detecting anomalies, thousands of them, littering the ocean floor like scattered bones. Pieces of wreckage, cargo, luggage. The operators held their breath. But as they zoomed in on the digital reconstructions, their hearts sank. None of the objects matched the materials, structure, or design of a Boeing 777. There were no identifying numbers, no familiar fragments, no human traces. Just an eerie spread of debris that told a story no one could decipher. "This is impossible," one of the crew members whispered, echoing the sentiment felt across the control room. How could a jetliner, one of the most sophisticated pieces of modern engineering, vanish so completely, leaving behind only silence and confusion? The mystery deepened. Not just of where the plane went, but how the Earth itself could hide it so well. The search had uncovered wonders and horrors beneath the waves. But the one answer everyone sought remained just out of reach, floating somewhere between the lines of science and the supernatural. And in the vast silence of the deep sea, that answer still waits. The flaperon and other clues. In July 2015, a breakthrough in the mystery of Malaysia Airlines. Flight MH370 seemed to surface, quite literally, on the shores of Réunion Island, a remote French territory in the Indian Ocean. a local beach cleaner stumbled upon a peculiar metallic object partially buried in the sand. Authorities would later confirm it to be a flaperon, a movable control surface attached to the wing of a Boeing 777. It was the first physical evidence definitively linked to the missing aircraft since its disappearance in March 2014. This discovery electrified investigators and reignited global interest in the search. The flaperon's condition told a story of its own. It bore signs of heavy water impact, consistent with high-speed contact with the ocean, but it was also curiously intact, suggesting it may have detached from the aircraft before the final breakup. This detail hinted at the possibility of a controlled descent, or at least something more complex than a simple crash. In the months and years that followed, more fragments began washing ashore along coastlines scattered across the western Indian Ocean, Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa. Over 20 pieces were eventually identified or deemed highly likely to belong to MH370. These parts ranged from interior cabin panels to parts of the tail and engine cowling. Some were jagged, almost violently torn, as though sheared off by immense pressure. Others had smoother separations, possibly the result of structural fatigue or prolonged exposure to the elements. The variety of damage only deepened the mystery. What kind of end could produce such inconsistent wreckage? But it wasn't just the debris itself that intrigued scientists. It was what clung to it. Many of the pieces were encrusted with barnacles, specifically Lepus anatifera, a species that only survives in particular sea temperatures and depths. Marine biologists saw an opportunity. By analyzing the size, growth rate, and distribution of the barnacles, they hoped to estimate how long the wreckage had been drifting, and possibly even reverse engineer the debris trail back to a potential crash site. This field of study, biofouling analysis, is painstaking and complex. Growth rings on barnacle shells, much like the rings of a tree, can provide timeframes. But ocean currents in the southern Indian Ocean are notoriously erratic. Gyres, eddies, and seasonal drifts can scatter wreckage across vast distances, making precise calculations nearly impossible. While the barnacles offered a faint whisper of truth, it wasn't enough to speak the plane's final coordinates aloud. The ocean, as it turned out, was a master of concealment. Despite these physical clues, the immense body of water refused to yield the ultimate answer. Where exactly did MH370 go down? Each piece of wreckage became both a revelation and a riddle. For every question it seemed to answer, it raised three more. Was the plane gliding when it hit? Did it disintegrate at altitude? Was the pilot in control until the very last moment? Investigators, journalists, and the families of passengers clung to each new find with hope, but the trail never led to the fuselage, the black boxes, or the hundreds of souls still missing. A decade later, the flaperon remains one of the most symbolic artifacts of MH370, haunting, silent, and heavy, with the weight of all that remains unknown. And as for the ocean, it continues to hold its secrets beneath the shifting waves, indifferent to the questions echoing above. Why the 2025 search changed everything. By the dawn of 2025, the mystery of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 had haunted the world for over a decade. The loss of 239 souls aboard the Boeing 777 had become not just a tragedy, but a symbol of modern aviation's blind spots, how a massive aircraft could vanish without a trace in the satellite age. Ocean Infinity, a US-based ocean exploration company, had been involved before, but this time, things were different. Armed with next-generation autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, equipped with AI-assisted sonar mapping and decades' worth of refined satellite data, the team launched what was quietly called the Final Sweep. The renewed mission wasn't just another attempt. It was a culmination of technological evolution, international desperation, and a whisper of hope that never quite died. Central to this new search were the revised drift models, hyper-advanced simulations created from thousands of data points, including sea current behavior, weather anomalies, and marine object drift analytics refined over 10 painstaking years. These models suggested something startling. The aircraft's likely resting place was just outside the original search grid, a narrow band of the southern Indian Ocean that had been overlooked due to early assumptions and bureaucratic blind spots. Initially, the Malaysian government hesitated. Internal debates raged, and officials feared another expensive dead end would further tarnish their reputation. But then, something shifted. A series of leaked internal reports began circulating online, indicating that critical satellite ping analysis from Inmarsat had been quietly updated in 2019, suggesting they might have missed a key inflection point in the so-called seventh arc. Public pressure exploded. Families of the victims, journalists, and aviation experts called for accountability. Under mounting scrutiny, and with few other options, the Malaysian government reluctantly gave Ocean Infinity the green light. And so the search began. For weeks, the AUVs combed the ocean floor in silence, gliding along trenches deeper than Everest is tall. Each return to the surface brought data more detailed than anything previously recorded. 3D topography so rich it could spot a shoelace in the silt. Yet the first weeks brought only geological formations, sunken shipping containers, and false alarms. Then came the ping. At approximately 3:47 UTC on March 11, one of the AUVs flagged an anomaly, an object far larger than anything else recorded in that sector. When the sonar imagery was reviewed, the room reportedly fell silent. There it was, the unmistakable outline of a wide-body jetliner resting eerily upright on the ocean floor, its fuselage shockingly intact. Wings partially detached, but present. Tail section embedded in silt, but visible. The curvature of the aircraft nose matched Boeing's 777 profile with terrifying precision. No one dared to confirm it, not yet. The ocean had played cruel tricks before, but this felt different. This wasn't scattered debris. This was a grave site, undisturbed for a decade. The discovery sent shockwaves around the globe. Within hours, satellite feeds picked up increased traffic near the search zone. Ocean Infinity maintained radio silence, requesting time for verification. But word had already leaked. Social media lit up. Families of victims gathered in vigils, some clutching photographs, others simply staring at the sea. For many, this wasn't closure. It was reopening a wound they'd spent years trying to stitch shut. What followed was a cascade of questions. How has this area been overlooked? Why was the aircraft so far off course and intact? And perhaps most haunting of all, why now? The 2025 search didn't just bring the world closer to an answer. It redefined the very nature of what it means to lose something in the modern age. It reminded us that, even in a world bathed in data, the ocean still holds secrets. And some of those secrets, it seems, were just waiting for us to look again. The breakthrough discovery. The sonar readings had hinted at something anomalous, metallic, unusually symmetrical. But when the high-resolution imaging came in, all doubts vanished. The structure, partially buried in a soft blanket of oceanic silt, revealed a silhouette that sent shivers down the spine of the entire command center. It was a Boeing 777, unmistakable even in its spectral state. The right wing had sheared off and rested several meters away, but the fuselage, long, cylindrical, battered, remained remarkably intact. Stenciled markings, though weathered by salt and time, aligned perfectly with the flight manifest. The numbers on the landing gear doors matched the serial registry of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. There was no longer any room for speculation. This was it. After years of speculation, theories, and failed searches across vast swaths of ocean, the impossible had finally materialized. Over a crackling satellite link, the lead systems engineer leaned in closer to the screen, his voice barely audible as emotion choked it into a whisper. "This is impossible." His words echoed through the control room, reverberating with awe and disbelief. The room fell silent, each person present gripped by the realization of what they were witnessing. The greatest aviation mystery of the 21st century had just taken a dramatic turn. The discovery site, some 4,000 meters below sea level, lay in a trench previously thought too remote and unstable to survey. Strong underwater currents had concealed it for over a decade, but now, with the help of next-gen scanning tech and deep-sea mapping drones, the truth had clawed its way back from the abyss. Remote-operated submersibles were immediately deployed. As the first descended, the world watched via livestream from the mission's classified operations center. The camera feed flickered, then stabilized, offering a chilling panoramic view of the wreckage. Seats were still bolted in place, some torn fabric fluttering ever so gently in the cold underwater currents. Others were empty, lifeless, shadows of the passengers who once filled them, but some still bore faded headrest covers, the Malaysia Airlines logo barely visible through a film of sediment. Personal belongings, shoes, headphones, a child's plush toy floated listlessly near the cabin floor, a time-frozen gallery of ordinary lives, now part of something extraordinary and tragic. But then came the part that chilled the world to its core. Inside the forward galley section, the submersible's camera picked up what initially looked like a collapsed storage unit. As it zoomed in, however, it became clear. The cockpit door was sealed from the inside. And within the cockpit, something even more unexplainable came into focus. The co-pilot's seat was empty, but the captain's seat still held a form, a uniform, a skeleton, hands still resting on the control yoke. The oxygen mask dangled just inches from his jaw. The world had finally found MH370, but in doing so, opened a new mystery even deeper than the ocean it was buried in. When recovery crews finally managed to access the most intact portion of the fuselage, the expectations were grim but clear. They anticipated finding evidence that could offer some closure. Instead, what they uncovered only deepened the mystery. Inside the aircraft, the interior was a chilling time capsule, preserved by cold ocean depths and layers of silt. But even here, something was off. Only 12 sets of human remains were found, far fewer than the total number of passengers and crew aboard. Experts were baffled. The aircraft had carried 239 people, yet less than 5% of the bodies were accounted for. Where were the rest? Ocean currents might explain some loss, but not to this extent. Forensic analysts began to whisper about other possibilities, ones too dark to be spoken aloud without evidence. Sections of the passenger cabin showed unmistakable signs of explosive decompression, a sudden rupture, likely caused by a high-pressure failure or a blast. The walls were warped outward, and seat belts had been torn loose from their anchor points. Several tray tables were embedded in the backs of seats, projectiles in a chaotic few seconds of terror. But it was the cockpit that raised the most alarming questions. The cockpit door appeared to have been sealed from the inside. This meant that either the pilots locked themselves in intentionally, or someone took over and made sure no one else could enter. There were deep scratch marks near the electronic lock, possibly made in desperation. Investigators recovered one of the 2 flight data recorders, but it was eerily incomplete. The outer casing was mostly intact, but the memory module, the very heart of the black box, was either damaged or deliberately removed. It was like discovering a journal with every critical page torn out. The second recorder, the cockpit voice recorder, remained missing. Then came perhaps the most disturbing detail of all. Behind one of the rear cabin panels, an electrical maintenance bay showed signs of deliberate tampering. The wiring harnesses had been stripped in places, some of them crudely spliced or rerouted. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for, and where. It wasn't vandalism. It was precise, calculated, and tucked behind the panel, soaked through but miraculously legible in places, was a handwritten note. Its ink had bled from water exposure, but some words could still be deciphered. Authorities have refused to publicly release the full text, citing ongoing forensic analysis. Shortly after the aircraft was partially recovered, whistleblowers began to emerge, from inside international aviation agencies, from the private satellite companies, even from contractors involved in the initial 2014 search. They all hinted at a similar narrative, that crucial early evidence had been withheld, redirected, or outright ignored. According to one former analyst, satellite images taken just days after the disappearance showed large linear debris patterns in the southern Indian Ocean, but these were dismissed as wave shadows, or false positives. Some of those images, the analyst claimed, were never publicly released. They had been locked away under classified status, protected by layers of international agreements. This revelation caused outrage. Families of the victims, already tortured by a decade of uncertainty, demanded to know, why hadn't these areas been searched earlier? Why were these images hidden? And who had the power to suppress them? Public outcry intensified when Joe Rogan addressed the case on his podcast, bringing the mystery back into the mainstream. If this was covered up, even slightly, he said, pausing for effect, the world deserves to know. We're talking about 239 souls. Somebody's hiding something. And it's not just some paperwork mistake. The episode went viral, sparking a wave of renewed interest from journalists, former pilots, and amateur investigators. Rogan's influence pushed the case back into the spotlight, reigniting demands for full disclosure. The world reacts. The global response was nothing short of seismic. Within hours of the findings being broadcast, landmarks across the world were bathed in blue and white, the colors of Malaysia Airlines. From Sydney's Opera House to the Eiffel Tower, candles were lit, not just in remembrance of the 239 souls lost, but also in renewed solidarity with their families, who had waited over a decade for answers that never came. In Kuala Lumpur, streets swelled with mourners. Some held portraits of missing loved ones, now faded with time but never forgotten. A choir of schoolchildren sang a haunting rendition of "In the Arms of the Angels" outside the Petronas Towers as a soft rain fell, almost as if the sky itself was grieving. Major networks immediately shifted programming. Primetime documentaries, retrospective panels, and newly unearthed interviews with former aviation investigators and relatives dominated the airwaves. Analysts pointed to the recovered contents with awe, confusion, and most alarmingly, fear. Because this wasn't just about a plane crash anymore. This was about something darker. If MH370 was found, why was it so impossibly far off course? Nearly 4,000 miles from its expected trajectory, the aircraft was located in one of the most remote and least mapped regions of the Indian Ocean basin. The area had already been searched, or so the world thought. Was the plane moved? Or had someone gone to great lengths to conceal it? And what of the remains? Despite the wreckage being largely intact, only a handful of partial remains were recovered. Forensic teams are baffled. Some speculate extreme heat or deep-sea scavengers. Others suggest something far more sinister: controlled disposal, evidence tampering, a cleanup that took years to orchestrate. Then there's the aircraft itself. Black box data appeared to have been wiped. Key systems were either corrupted or disabled. Internal components, including communication modules, had been manually disconnected. This wasn't the work of a crash, it was the work of a cover-up. The search may be over, but the mystery has only deepened. Could this shocking discovery finally bring closure, or will it only deepen the mystery surrounding flight MH370? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video with us, and catch you in the next one.